Good afternoon, ladies and gents. It's the 3rd of April 2025, and I have a question for you. Actually, before we hit that, um, I'm going to be throwing up some slides during this session. It's going to be a relatively quick one. Apologies that it's not entertaining. This is not an entertainment channel, to be honest with you. I'm here to provide you with information, sort of serious information. But I don't want you sort of falling asleep. Sort of, 2 minutes in. I'm going to throw these slides up. Hopefully they're relevant. But I've just got a question for you. Who believes in the term history repeating itself? Guys, I don't know about you, but I'm always looking for some kind of confirmation, clarification, and fidelity in the information that we read, hear, and see. And unfortunately, ladies and gents, most of us are looking in the wrong places for these ticks in boxes. See, mainstream work alongside government, as I've said on previous occasions, and we all know that, we know what the governments are about. Now, listen, when I say this, I'm talking about the government here in the UK. They're pretty much all the same. They all do the same thing, and they all take, talk the same sort of shit. I watched a political broadcast by the Labour Party here in the UK, either yesterday or day before, on the TV, and I've heard some rubbish in my years on this planet. And just when you sort of thought it couldn't get any worse, they come out with a load a load more rubbish. But guys, I'm not gonna go on about that. That's not what this session's about. Let's just leave that. Let's just move on. Right now, the world isn't it isn't quite in turmoil, but is without a doubt heading that way. Conflicts in the key regions around the world involving not some, but all of the superpowers. Areas of theatre you will or should be aware of, and that is Russia in Ukraine, soon to be a war between Russia and NATO. Ongoing intense fighting across the whole of the Middle East, soon to be all-out war with the US and Israeli militaries, who are going to end up fighting predominantly with Iran, which of course will, without a doubt, sort of draw in all of those other sort of neighbouring countries in one way, shape, or form. And then we have Asia, whether that be the conflict between the countries south of the North Korean border in theatre with North Korea, or we could see sort of tensions rapidly escalating between China and various other countries in that region, if that is Taiwan is invaded. The US have military bases across Asia. I think they have something like 14 bases in Japan alone. Right, what I'm doing here, guys, I'm just going to give you some information on the postures in some of these regions before we talk about history repeating itself. Just quickly in Asia, so there's 14 bases, US bases in Japan alone, then 8 bases in South Korea, some or one at least in the Marshall Islands. They've got a presence in Singapore, the British Indian Territory, 9 bases in the Philippines, some in Papua New Guinea, and obviously Australia in the Asia Pac region or division, if that's what you want to call it. So an all-out conflict between the US and China and North Korea would be another regional war. And again, like the Middle East and Russia versus NATO, would all they'd all definitely be complex war theatres to deal with. All three going off together would be a world war like no other. I believe. Just one of those theatres going off in full swing would be quite a bit to sort of deal with, and maybe one or two proxies, but three, three. They're big. If you've got Russia and NATO kicking off, that's big on in itself. Asia, whether that's North and South Korea, pulling in the Philippines, Japan, Australia, China, and Taiwan, and then the Middle East. Well, we're talking about numerous different countries there. But I just wanted to sort of give you an idea of the assets that are already in play there. And at the moment, you will be reading that the US are flying shitloads of military assets into the Middle Eastern region as we speak. So putting the conflicts aside, um, I just want to quickly have a look at the economies. Okay, I'm not an economist. I don't understand the economies too well. It's not something I've focused on. However, I've been forced really to look at it because it does have an impact, and it is factored into what's happening sort of around the world in various sort of places. So I'm just going to give you my take on this. Um, Looking at the economies around the world, not yet in free fall, but it seems that they're heading in that direction, whether that be price hikes on energy bills as a result of, I don't know, conflicts in Europe, the cost of living crisis, certainly seen here in the UK and across Europe and other continents, due to high inflation and rising costs, I don't know, across many goods and services. Personally, for us here in the UK, though, this could have started back when the UK came out of the EU. So we're talking about Brexit. And although the millions sort of voted for the country to take back control, the UK government had no idea what that task actually sort of meant or even looked like, which ultimately led to their incompetence. I believe is still not fully resolved today. There's one thing that has kind of come out of the UK leaving the EU today, and a bit of an ace card, to be honest with you. The US tariffs have hit the sort of EU with those tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, at around about 39%. So it's nowhere near as bad as Vietnam, China. Who else was there? There was Indonesia, India, and Cambodia, I think, with high sort of tariff percentages. But obviously, the EU, as well as others, are obviously now putting in play sort of plans to retaliate with counter tariffs against the US. Enough about that for a minute, as I'll cover a small piece on that in just a minute when, when we talk about history repeating itself. So just moving on. Not long after that, whether it was the elites or the governments and or whoever had an invested interest in it, we had human beings creating a man-made virus and releasing it out onto the public domain, accident or not. 7 million people were reported to have succumbed to the COVID virus as a result. So, guys, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but we'll leave that. But what I'm trying to say is, well, I'm just trying to lay the lay of the land at the moment. So for us here in the UK, Brexit was a kind of starting point of instability within our region. Then, obviously, the pandemic that kind of kicked in. Um, you know, so I'm just putting them there because it will make sense in a minute. What I'm pointing out here, though, is the significant events and occurrences that have happened, which could have kick-started, let's say, for instance, the cost of living. And in my view, I mean, I don't know what you think, but when they say the cost of living, to me, that's just rebranding a recession. It's a recession. We're in a recession, and that's it. So it's just rebranded. The economy has been hit with these events, and don't think it had a chance to recover. Actually, certainly here in the UK. But going back to the question I asked a couple of minutes ago, who believes in the term history repeating itself? I'm asking this question because I've been analysing the Ukraine war now for 3 years, as well as other conflicts, political sagas, diplomatic announcements, and the embarrassments that have been sort of put out there, and also economic downturns. And I'm asking this question because I don't know. I've been analysing it for sort of various reasons, but and thankfully, to be fair, because without this information, then I wouldn't be able to make the decisions that I'm making in terms of, the preps that, that may need to be in place for me and my family. But I'm going to be honest with you, I've been struggling to get my head around why some of these things are happening and unfolding in front of our eyes. I understand that if I fall out with somebody in a pub, we could end up having to tear up a straightener or a fight. And I'm ex-forces and I understand conflict or potential conflict, but I've been struggling with the political bullshit. So I try my utmost to not sort of get too involved, but the economy is becoming a new chapter of analysis for me, that I'm kind of being forced to look at the moment. And when I say that, what I mean is that in itself brings another level of threats to us, whether it's financial, whether it's poverty, whether it's whatever it is. But we won't talk about that. Not in this video. I wasn't too keen on school, to be honest with you, and history was definitely one of the subjects I hated alongside French. Couldn't stand those two subjects, but history. It's a subject that I've had to look into in trying to better understand, what the hell is going on, sort of here and around us. See, most people these days are just aimlessly walking through life with bubbles on their heads. I'll keep saying it. I'll say it in all my videos, and I'm sure I'm going to say it in others. But they've got bubbles on their heads. They've got phones, glued to their faces, and with no real understanding with what's happening outside of their hometown or city or wherever it is they reside. And the main reason for me pursuing some knowledge in history is because, quite simply, I'm looking for signs today that exist, or existed and were apparent back in the day, shall we say? So, before now, around the last World War, shall we say? What I mean by that is that for me, I class myself as a prepper, and with that, I need to understand fully what I'm preparing for before any plans can sort of be put into place. I become a prepper, or shall we say an official prepper well, I became a prepper, I think, on the 24th of February, 2022, when those Russian tanks rolled across the border into Ukraine. So with that, we need to understand what we're preparing for, and that obviously depends on where in the world or which country we live in. I'm here in the UK, but feel that I can speak for everyone sort of living across Europe in any country in Europe at the moment, especially when we're talking about this particular conflict. Sorry to be a bearer of bad news, and I hope that I'm wrong, but based on my analysis of the Ukraine war for the last 1,133 days, as well as other conflicts and developments, whether that be, I don't know, military postures changing in preparation for war, with the movement of assets moving into theatres around the world, with the downturns in the economies at the moment and fallouts between political leaders. I believe that a new world war has already started. And with that information, I have to understand what that looks like for me and my family. It's as simple as that. When preparing, first and foremost, we're going to be looking for confirmation for a number of reasons. None of us want to be wasting our time on prepping for something that isn't going to happen, obviously. It is a waste of time, because let's face it, most of us have got better things that we can be doing. For some, it's surfing social media, or playing Candy Crush. But and it also can be a waste of money, which many of us don't have to waste, because this prepping business is, without a doubt, going to cost something. Now, it depends on what level you want to take it to, but before that, it depends on how much disposable cash you can either find or put to this project. But we can't even begin to understand what any of that looks like if we have no idea about those threats. I'm here in the UK and I'm now fully aware of all the threats that could or are sort of possible and likely to affect me and my family if any of them kick off. I spent the last 3 years kind of studying and analysing and looking, so I'm comfortable with that. My mind is in a comfortable place. I'd much rather be in this place than not even being aware at all, because I'm telling you, if I had to put my life on it, and I won't, none of this is looking good. Those threats are going to come in all shapes and sizes, but I'm going to stop right there because once again, I've gone off on a tangent when we should be addressing the question. So let's get back to that question. And we were losing the term history repeating itself. So let me tell you why I'm finding the importance of this question significant. I'm quite simply looking for indicators on whether or not I should be preparing. And one of those resources is history. If one is to believe that a new world war is upon us, I want to make this point. We've already had two world wars, guys. So this is not a new event in any way, shape, or form. It's only a new event to you and I, depending on your ages, of course, but because most of us have never lived through those two world wars. I've not concentrated too much on World War One, but have with World War Two, because it was the latter. The invasion of Poland on the 1st of September 1939 was considered the official start of the war. This is World War Two. As I've just mentioned earlier, I believe World War Three started on the 24th of February 2022 with Russia invading Ukraine. Of course, in 1937, a couple of years before World War Two, there was Japan's invasion of China. As Japan had already started its own war of aggression in Asia, we can compare this to today, albeit conflicts not yet in full swing. We've got the Middle East. Over the coming weeks, is going to implode. Mark my words, that's one region that's probably going to go first, with the US and Iran, as well as others such as Israel. So they'll definitely be in the mix, and with the Israelis involved, that possibly draws in Syria, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and also Yemen. Yemen are already involved. They are going to be. I think the US are going to make an example of them. What you see happen in Yemen is going to be a kind of just a taster, I think. But that's only what I think. A US asset will be sort of taken out in the form of a naval ship, I think, possibly only because the Houthis are, they're pushing the boundaries. But of course, it's their country, it's their people, it's their lives. Um, it could be a naval ship, a US naval ship, or a US bases, or one of the bases in the region very soon. They're being targeted, and there's quite a high military US military presence in that region, and the US government will then try to flatten those responsible. But let's leave that one there on the back burner just for now, with possible conflicts between the North and South Koreans, which involves Japan and the US and others, and also leave the Chinese and Taiwanese. Well, let's leave them on the back burner just for a minute. I just want to go over this other point, which brings me on to the subject that I wanted to mention, and that's the economy, because right now I'm out of work again, and we're going to be feeling a pinch at some point soon, if, excuse me, something doesn't change. The cost of living is simply a recession, and we can see the embers of a depression brewing, possibly. The Great Depression started in 1929 and went on for 10 years up until the beginning of World War Two. There was a world war economic downturn affecting nearly every country. High unemployment, bank failure, reduced industrial production and trade, and deflation caused by stock market crashes, banking panics, international trade issues, and overproduction. I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but unemployment here in the UK is up and it's rising. We've not seen any bank failures yet, but we are seeing a series of bank failures and financial crashes sort of happening elsewhere. Share prices on hundreds of large companies are being hit, certainly sort of today over the last couple of days and probably the last few weeks. And companies' shares going into the red. Stock markets are pretty much. I would say that stock markets at the moment, in terms of stock shares and that kind of thing, are as volatile as crypto, as in the crypto commodity, and the list just goes on. But with the US and tariffs, we're not starting to see reduced industrial production and trade. We've got steel and car production seem to be the industries likely to be hit first by the US tariffs here in the UK, that is, which is having an international impact on trade as a whole. Back in 1929, we have to remember the Wall Street crash, which was a major market crash in the US. And as a result, many banks closed. Ordinary people lost their savings, and people lost all hope for the future, quite frankly. Workers were made redundant because customers couldn't afford to be buying anything like cars and clothes. Therefore, production went down. Other workers' wages were cut, and ultimately higher levels of unemployment. So, these tariffs, this is what we're talking about. I'm talking about these tariffs. I know it might be boring for some. I had no understanding of tariffs really up until a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, let's say a month ago. I needed to understand what it was about. And why now, and what is the impact? Because again, like I keep saying, I need to understand what these threats are that are going to possibly affect me and my family. And whilst I'm out there looking for these signs from events in the past happening again now and across the world, it's everything that we're reading about and seeing. This is a global. These are global changes and global events. But whilst I was looking for these events, I came across a university paper which speaks about our American friends out there. You'll be familiar with this. Anyone outside of it, possibly not. But it's this university paper speaks about the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, a law that implemented protectionism or protectionist trade policies in the US. As the global economy entered, the first stages of the Great Depression in the 1929, the main goal of the US was to protect its jobs and farmers from foreign sort of competition. Exactly what Trump is doing today, to be honest. Most of the decline in trade was due to the plunge in GDP in the US and worldwide. However, beyond that was the additional decline. Some countries protested and others also retaliated with trade restrictions and tariffs. Exactly what we're hearing and reading about today, this week. And certainly we're going to hear a lot more over the next 24 to 72 hours. American exports back then to the protesters fell by 18%, and exports to those who retaliated fell by 31%. Threats of retaliation by other countries began long before the bill was enacted into law in June 1930. So, what I'm trying to say, guys, is that what we're seeing and listening to and reading about now has already happened, and it's nearly it's like word for word out of a script book. Everything that Trump is announcing and doing, it's already been done pretty much word for word. So again, I'll go back to that question, history repeating itself. Now, if that is the case, we need to understand why the tariffs were introduced and caused, the problems it did back in the 1930s, just before a world war. And is that happening now? That's all we're looking at, guys. That's all we want to know. As the House of Representatives, actually, they passed this new act in May 1929. Boycotts then broke out, and foreign governments moved in to increase the rates against American products. Although rates could be increased or decreased by the Senate or by the conference committee, by September 1929, Hoover would have been the PM or the president at the time. So Hoover's administration had received protest notes from 23 trading partners. But the threats of retaliation actions were just simply ignored. And these are events that we're likely to start seeing and hearing about over like I say, over the next couple of weeks or so. Mark my words. In May 1930, Canada, the most loyal trading partner for the US, retaliated by imposing new tariffs on 16 products that encountered altogether for approximately 30% of US exports to Canada. Later, Canada also they forged closer economic links with the British Empire via the British Empire Economic Conference of 1932. Exactly what we're seeing today. Then you've got France and Britain protesting and developed new trading partners. Then we had Germany developed a system of trade via clearing. Honestly, it's like reading a script for what's about to come. It's literally nearly word for word. The depression worsened for workers and farmers despite Smoot and Hawley's promises of prosperity for higher tariffs. Consequently, Hawley lost renomination, while Smoot was one of 12 Republican senators who lost their seats in 1930 or the 1932 elections, with the swing being the largest in the Senate history. So, as a result of this tariff act and all the actions and the turmoil it caused, it actually didn't do America any favors. And for those responsible for enforcing and passing that act and that law or whatever, they, they didn't last too long at all. So if that's going to be history repeating itself, then make the most of Trump and his guys that are running around wiping his ass and kissing his feet because they won't be around for much longer either. Anyway, that's enough on the tariffs. When Trump first announced these, I just couldn't understand what was happening and why. So off into history I went. But the concerning similarities here are worrying and it should be the most concerning for I think it's going to be concerning for a lot of people around the world. It's hard to pinpoint who and where because I don't understand that, imports and exports between, different trading partners around the globe. But there's impacts. There's going to be impacts. Remember, guys, I'm a prepper and I'm looking for the possible threats, but have to firstly identify those signs. So to confirm and validate my next moves. That's the only reason I'm doing this. I see history repeating itself here, and if that is the case, then we're going to see the economies around the world be hit by trade wars. We could see another Wall Street crash, another depression, and I've heard some say is necessary for the global finance. Is basically what they're saying is what's happening at the moment is a necessity for global financial resets, whatever that means. But unfortunately, we're also seeing the makings of World War or a new World War, should we say, which seems to be on paper and in history also a necessity. I know that sounds as mad as it sounds, but it's part of the reset, I think. Those are my high level threats, the economy and the war. So I narrow these down and I just look at these threats here in the UK. Guys, I've done a number of videos which cover some of these threats, more so around the military threats to us here in the UK. And yeah, I should think about publishing actually a couple of videos on the on economic threats and the preparations that people should make. But again, I need to fully understand this topic. If they're a threat to me, then that warrants a video. But firstly, I need to, like I say, fully understand this threat before trying to warn and deliver information to you guys. Apologies for the history bore, but I think it's important to factor in. Let's crack on with this and let's just get this finished. In chronological order, if you're to believe history is repeating itself in front of our eyes, I see the following. I'm just going to go through it. It's a very short list. I'm just going to go through it. Okay, right. 1935. Before World War II, several invasions and proxy wars, like the Italian invasion of Ethiopia and the Spanish Civil War, fueled escalating tensions and demonstrated the failure of appeasement. Excuse me. Ultimately, paving the way for a global conflict. Okay, that's not what's happening now. This is what happened in 1935. History repeating itself, possibly. So, invasions, proxy wars, and pre-war preparations. So, Japanese invasion of Ethiopia in 1931. Japan invaded and occupied. No, it wasn't Ethiopia. It was Manchuria. Manchuria in China. Italy then invaded Ethiopia, sorry, in 1935. So Italy under Mussolini invaded and conquered Ethiopia. German remilitarization of the Rhineland in 1936. So Hitler defied the Treaty of Versailles by sending troops into the demilitarized Rhineland. Japanese invasion of China in 1937. So Japan launched a full-scale invasion on China. Then we had the Munich Agreement in 1938. Germany to the agreement kind of laid out the plans for Germany to annex the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia, further emboldening Hitler. Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939. So the Spanish Civil War is a prime example of a proxy war back then. And then the invasion of Poland in 1939. So Germany's invasion of Poland on the 1st of September 1939 triggered World War II. So what I've just said there are proxy wars and invasions and civil wars and various other things that we are clearly seeing today. Okay, we're seeing this today. Today and by far at the moment, or at the moment of this video, the most significant is the war in Ukraine by Russia at the moment. Before that, and kind of still ongoing, the civil war in Syria back in 2011, not the most recent, but kind of in recent times, and also the back end of 2024, so only a few months ago, and then also, that's still continuing today into 2025. And of course, the civil war in Yemen in 2015, I believe, which ultimately it was ignited again. I don't know actually whether there is any kind of level of civil war in Yemen at the moment today in 2025. If there isn't, then I believe there soon will be. We have NATO, which is 32 member state countries preparing for war against Russia. North Korea flexing their muscles to the US, South Korea and Japan. And now on the conflict radar, we are starting to see tensions brewing up between China, Taiwan, and the US. So, tariffs, as mentioned above, 1929, the Wall Street crash, then the Great Depression, followed by Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. We now see Trump this week reenacting this very event. We could see market crashes like that seen in Wall Street. The world has been going through price crises for months now, better known to you and I as it's a recession. Okay, that's it. Forget about cost of living and all that. It's a recession, and we could see a depression off the back of these tariffs. That's the reality. That's kind of what happened last time. If we're gonna, go down this route of history repeating itself, that's what could happen. Um, and this stage is the most painful to mention, and that is another world war. And that, ladies and gents, is definitely an event that is currently brewing and in motion as we speak. Last but not least, and if history wants to, continue repeating itself after the World War, we could see another Cold War. Last seen back in 1947, following the end of World War II, which is a state of conflict between nations that doesn't involve direct military action, but is pursued primarily through economic and political actions, propaganda, acts of espionage or proxy wars waged by surrogates. So it's not a full-blown conventional between, countries. It's all the tit for tat stuff and all the other sort of angles. This war, the Cold War, it lasted until 1991 when the Soviet Iron Curtain finally came down. So as soon as that happened, the West moved eastwards under the guise of NATO, clawing up as many of those independent countries as possible. After Ukraine declared independence in 1991, Estonia, Latvia, as did Georgia, uh, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and others, they declared independence. And the following joined NATO. So you had the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, then Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, and Macedonia, with Finland and Sweden joining just over the last 12 months. So some might say they can understand why Putin has got the ump, and is seeing a threat. If you look at it, if you look at what's happened since 1991. Anyway, enough of the history lesson. I just wanted to point out the similarities in the historic events that I've just mentioned, and I'm sure there's plenty more this is only my view, guys, that I can see unfolding today. Just because I see it unfolding doesn't, mean that that's what's happening. It's just I go on fact and logic. So if I can see this happening, then it's happening. So I need to understand why. Um, should we be taking note and classing these events as signs of what's to come, or do we just say fuck it? Let's let's just keep the bubbles on our heads and just get on with our lives. The choice is yours, guys. You either listen to this. I know it's going to be boring, uh, but let me just say this. This channel and these videos are not for entertainment purposes, okay, guys? I'm not here to entertain anyone. If I was here to entertain, then I'd be entertaining. This is not entertainment. I'm trying to get information across that is likely or possibly going to turn yours and your family's worlds upside down. Okay, that's the seriousness of what we're saying here. And I'm just trying to kind of get the message across that people just need to open their eyes and see what's going on. Anyway, as we finish, just get yourselves military fit, or just get out there, suck in some of that fresh air, have a walk, and do some form of exercise. Preparedness needs to start with you. Your body, and your mind needs to be prepared before you can even begin to take on some of these challenges. Healthy body, healthy mind, as they say, and believe me, that's an accurate sort of statement to make. Also, guys, get yourselves infantry aware. This doesn't mean combat, but more so it's around sort of survival skills and preparedness. I hope with these videos that some of you can take some useful information away. If you can, if you can take just one piece of information away from one or more of these videos, then I'm happy. Before being prepared, ladies and gents, we have to understand the threats, and an assessment should be made on the likelihood of those threats taking place. So just keep your ear to the ground, just keep your eyes open, because things are happening, and there are going to be some serious changes coming our way. When I say our way, I'm talking about people here in the UK, and I'm feel fairly confident in saying that the same applies to people across Europe if we're talking about that theatre. But the Middle East as well, and then Asia as well. So anyway, that's enough for me. Hopefully, you can understand it.